Guys, I'm Matt Boyer. I'm the New Jersey State Chairman and Rutgers Chapter President for Young Americans for Liberty. Just before we get started, I want just be aware our exits are in front here in the back corners, and this is being filmed. So if you're uncomfortable with that, I'm sorry. There's that. But as you know, we're here talking about PC culture, talking about freedom of speech, talking about passionate bunch. I like it. But it's not about me tonight, obviously. We have Breitbart editor, technology editor, and media firebrand, Milo Yiannopoulos. So please give him a warm welcome, folks. He's here to talk to all of you.
Thank you for that lukewarm welcome. In case you haven't heard, Daddy smashed it in New Hampshire. Well, Daddy's done good work in New Hampshire, so your sassy gay uncle has come to spread the love here. I'm going to talk to you actually super briefly. I'm not going to take very long because I know that the exciting bit is the Q&A. And everybody wants to talk and have some questions, and we're going to have some fun there. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about why I think there are some problems on campuses at the moment, specifically with free speech and coming from one particular political direction, and why it matters, although you might think that most of the people who are asking for free speech to be shut down, demanding safe spaces and trigger warnings and all manner of other bollocks, why these people actually have a sort of outsized influence compared to their actual numbers. The protests are disappointing, by the way. Is there anybody in here who hates me? Anyone? Yes, there we go. Thank you. I'm afraid. This is an event for 7s and above, so anyone who just put their hand up, please leave. If you're from one of the feminist movements on campus, I've put an ice cream truck outside. Going to be rowdy tonight, I can tell. I'm going to rattle through this fairly quickly. Anybody here believe in any of the... Let's talk briefly through the politically correct prescriptions of our age. Does anyone here believe that women are paid less than men for the same work? Put your hand up. Right. Everyone who puts their hands up, you're idiots. Does anyone here believe that there is a pervasive culture of rape that means that American university campuses have higher rates of sexual assault than the Congo? More than 1 in 5 women being sexually assaulted. Does anybody believe that about American campuses? Anybody? No? Fewer idiots on that one. Good. Well, that's something. These claims, based on advocacy research repeated by credulous journalists, are designed to do one thing. They're designed to push a particular political ideology on you that is divisive, hateful, bigoted, in many cases racist, in many cases sexist, and is simply not very much fun. And I like fun, so I want to talk to you a little bit about free speech and how free speech can be fun. Thank you. If you're in the audience and you are aggrieved about the gender pay gap, let me make your life happier and explain to you why you're wrong. If you take all of the money that women earn and all of the money that men earn and you do a simple sort of division, you will arrive at a figure of, let's say, 79 cents on the dollar. The problem with this is that it is babyish economics of the childish kind that only the progressive left could possibly believe in. The problem with this stuff is it doesn't take into account the different choices that women make. It doesn't take into account the fact that women tend to work shorter hours, they have babies, they do all sorts of other things that mean that it's not an oranges to oranges comparison. Now, the problem with the wage gap is it's used to suggest that if a woman goes into the workplace, she's going to be paid 79 cents for the same work as a man. Well, that confuses wages with earnings. So if you believe that there's a wage gap, I would encourage you to return to the dictionary and learn what wages mean. Because it is illegal to pay a man and a woman differently for the same work. And in fact, it doesn't happen. Now, all sorts of these sort of politically correct prescriptions surround us. There are feminists on campus who are demanding to kill all white men as though that was some sort of move toward equality, when in fact it's simply a gesture of female chauvinism and hatred towards people that the modern intersectional far-left feminist lesbianic movement doesn't like very much. Well... I'm going to be... Somebody's been watching me too much on YouTube. I agree with you. It's outside the scope of the present discussion, but since you brought it up... No, I'm not entirely sure there's sex without penises. I don't really think that works. I mean, the lesbians that we like aren't really lesbians. They're just women in porn, aren't they? And and if there are lesbians, it seems to me a sort of fashionable political movement we should stamp out, given the extraordinary rates of domestic violence, the obesity crisis, and by the way, this is an interesting thing. Did you know that there is one respect in which the campus rape crisis is real? Do you know what it is? Can anyone tell me? I've sort of given it away already. There is just one rape crisis on campus. It is the lesbian rape crisis. If you look at the statistics from the Department of Justice, you will see that vastly disproportionately, the women who report sexual assault on campus describe themselves as lesbians. If there is a rape epidemic on campus, it's not being committed by men. And if you look at the justice statistics, which are the gold standard, you'll discover all sorts of things that feminists won't tell you. I'm going to take you on a really super quick tour because I want to get onto the questions very, very quickly about some of the things that are going on at other universities. Now, Rutgers doesn't have a completely clean pair of hands. You have a reasonable claim here to being one of the universities that sort of invented trigger warnings. You also have, you did, and I'm mad with you about that. You also have among your graduates a woman called Jessica Valenti. Has anyone heard of Jessica Valenti? Now, I'm not saying that everything at Rutgers, I'm not saying Rutgers is responsible for the creation of Jessica Valenti, but you're something like Hitler's Austrian Art College. You're not entirely responsible for the Second World War, but she did go here. It's okay. I forgive you. But yeah, no, I mean, Rutgers has an interesting history with this stuff. You have been at the forefront of many of these innovations. There's a strong feminist presence on campus. There's a strong Black Lives Matter presence on campus. There you go. you see, ladies and gentlemen, truth and justice always prevail in the end. There is no one to whom Black Lives Matter more than me. And these segregated dorms that you guys want, well, you know where to find me. But what I find interesting about the movement, regardless of their stated aims, is just how much like the KKK, just how much like the KKK's their objectives are. They want segregated dorms. They want to tear people apart on the basis of race. What I'd like to move on to, we can all agree that all lives matter. We can all agree. We can all agree, I think, agree that the chauvinism and divisiveness and spitefulness and hatefulness of the modern progressive movement, which drives people apart instead of bringing them together, is something that we should resist on campuses. We can all agree, I think, in the great words of, what was it, Martin Luther King? That the contents of somebody's character. We can agree, I think, at least I hope we can, that we should judge. I love these guys. This is my favorite section of the audience so far. We can agree, at least I hope we can agree, on some basics, on the basics of classical liberalism, on the basis on which our society is founded, that we should judge people on the contents of their character, that we should interrogate arguments, not skin color. And I think we should also be able to agree, I think we should also try at least to agree, that the way to achieve equality is not to lie about rape, as feminists do. The way to achieve equality is not to lie about how people are remunerated, as feminists do. And I think finally we can agree, and then we're going to get to questions, because I can tell, And I think... I can come closer. There's only one of me, but I've got lots of these. I'm doing a good Marco Rubio impression tonight. We can agree, I think, that the purpose of a university, the reason that we are all here, is to interrogate new ideas, to discover new things about ourselves, to experiment with dangerous ideas, to experiment with new forms of knowledge, and to meet new people, to introduce ourselves to new experiences, and to learn more about the world around us. up against that mission, up against what ought to be the central purpose of higher education, what ought to be the reason that we're all here, is a culture of safe spaces and trigger warnings, which seeks to insulate people from anything that might traumatize or upset them. Of course, they're not really traumatized or upset, they're just upset that someone disagrees with them. In my view, anybody who asks for a trigger warning in a safe space should be immediately expelled. What they've done is they've demonstrated that they are incapable of fulfilling the requirements of their course. They have demonstrated that they are incapable of exposing themselves to new ideas. They have demonstrated that they are incapable of engaging in the humble pursuit of knowledge, which is... I think we're, if I could ask you to sit down. All right, let's settle down. Anybody else who wants to get something out of their systems, please do it now. All right, let's settle down. I think we've reached the. Oh. We just have the fun people left, right? All right, settle down, guys. Thank you. Still my favorite bit of the audience. I think we've reached the limit of what we can constructively get through. I had more. All right, we're going to move on to questions. I'm going to ask you, the questions are the fun bit. It's what everybody comes for. So let's skip ahead. We're going to go to questions. I'm going to ask you, anybody can ask anything. Ask me whatever you want. I know that a lot of you have read and listened to a lot of my stuff, so you'll have questions about that. I'm happy to... I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask you to... All right, guys, settle down. All right, let's settle down. We're going to move on to questions. I'm going to ask you to be respectful of the people asking the questions. Some of them you won't agree with. Many of us don't agree with this guy. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. We are here to interrogate new ideas, after all. So we ought to, unlike the left, try to at least engage in the other side of the argument and listen to what they have to say. I'm perfectly happy to answer questions. I noticed when they were asked questions, they left the room. So let's move on to the questions. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to be respectful of the other people in the hall, and if you would like to pick some questioners, that would be a good way for us to proceed.
Respectfully ask some questions. We're going to pick on some people.
Hello. With who? Oh, dear Ben. We love Ben. He's lovely. He's lovely. Very short, but lovely. Yeah.
How can you identify as being gay and be for the Conservative Party? Like, I agree with you that you can, but I want to play devil's advocate.
Sure. Well, I think homosexuals are natural libertarians. It doesn't make very much sense for gay people to be subsidizing pregnancies if they take a self-interested approach to taxation, for instance. We know that men pay way more into the system, pay far more in taxation. Women take far more out. They die later, they have babies, they get sick more. As a gay man, why should I subsidize pregnancies? I don't care. So there's a view that homosexuals are natural libertarians, and I think I agree with that. The problem the left has with people like me is that I've sort of gone off ideological reservation. I'm a traitor to the left because although I like to suck dick, I don't believe in, a massive state that sucks all of our taxes out and doesn't give us any control over where our money goes. Now, these views are considered dangerous, hence the name of the tour, because the left can't get me on any of their usual argumentative strategies. Now, normally, when you hear somebody complaining about feminism or the wage gap or whatever, the normal response of the left is to try to delegitimize the speaker rather than attack the arguments. So they'll call him a bigot, they'll call him a misogynist, they'll call him a sexist. They can't really get away with that with me. Similarly, because I don't really care about them one way or the other, I don't want to fuck you fat or thin, ladies. So I don't care too much about that kind of stuff, and actually I think it makes perfect sense in an age when gays rightly have many of the same, most, if not all, of the same rights and entitlements as everybody else, for them to continue to vote for progressive parties that do not act in their interests. Now, for me, the essence of gay culture, the essence of the best thing about being gay is the ability to be dissident, to be naughty, to be mischievous, to push the boundaries of what can be thought and said. That's the essence of drag culture. It's the essence of many of the dissident gay thinkers of the past, William S. Burroughs, Quentin Crisp. I like to think of myself as being in a similar tradition. The people, these sort of dissident gay thinkers are given license to think outside the box because they're not constrained by the traditional structures like marriage, which is why I think gay marriage is a bit of a shame. Gay people are where Mother Nature experiments, where she plays around and sees what's possible, which is why gays are so overrepresented in artists, philosophers, politicians, many of the sort of leading elites of the world. Gay people are very overrepresented in those groups. We have higher IQ than the rest of you, on average, as well, which doesn't hurt. So I don't see anything particularly contradictory about being conservative and gay. I think it's probably more accurate to say I'm libertarian and gay, and I think that simply makes perfect sense. Yeah, that's about it.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm also a fellow gay.
Hello.
Honey.
Do you have a question not related to your identity?
Yes, actually, regarding political correctness, I've always understood it as, I suppose, a historically marginalized group wanting to control how or what they were called. Like, I'm a black man, obviously. However, beforehand, until very recently in our history, there were a lot of other words that I could have been called. From my perspective, political correctness is making sure that other people don't do that. Where are there inconsistencies between you and I in that statement? And also, Black Lives Matter.
So I think the difference is between, there are three related terms here that I don't think have very much to do with one another. There's courtesy, there's racism, and there's political correctness. Now, courtesy describes a set of codes that we all use to navigate the world successfully and to communicate with one another. The reality is that we're all a little bit sexist and we're all a little bit racist. Everybody is, to larger and lesser extent. Now, the left believes that you can stamp that out by policing language. They think that if you change the words you use for things, that you can change reality. Well, you can't. You can't make people unracist by banning the N-word. You can't stop people being homophobic by banning school children from using the word gay in the playground. That's not how it works. So the purpose of a civilized society is for all of us to enable all of us to live together in harmony and to communicate with one another and to successfully build businesses and have interpersonal relationships with one another despite our limitations and our bigotries, and not to try to stamp them out. Now, that's what we call courtesy or etiquette and politeness. Racism is something different. The N-word is racism. That doesn't really fall into that bucket, which is presumably the main word that you were referring to. Political correctness is something a bit different. Courtesy and consideration, politeness, etiquette, we use to navigate the world so as not to run up against other people unnecessarily. We use it as social lubricant. But political correctness is a bit different. Political correctness seeks to reduce the scope of acceptable thought and language in order to guide discussion in a particular ideological direction. So when, for example, feminists want to ban particular words, or political correctness takes on its other weird manifestation, enables you to say what are effectively bigoted and racist things about particular groups, like the straight white man of mythology, who, according to all the data, is doing really badly, according to the media and liberal groups on campus, is ruling the world. Well, the patriarchy is not doing a very good job, if that's the case. Because young white boys are being thrown on Ritalin and Adderall when they're in school. At college, they're subject to consent classes that tell them they're all potential rapists. When they get into the workplace, they are 2-to-1 discriminated against in STEM fields. Women will get jobs just for being women. If there is a patriarchy, it's not doing a very good job. And political correctness seeks to hide these things from us. It's a kind of elaborate form of lying, which uses language in order to close off certain avenues of debate. Now, no one's going to argue with you, sir, that nobody should be using the N-word, but there are all sorts of other things that go on that are designed to limit the acceptable bounds of speech and thought. And that's, for example, the trigger warning and safe space culture. That is political correctness in action. That's very different from what you described. So that would be, I think, where we differ if we differ.
So I have a question. You said earlier you believe that you think that the Black Lives Matter movement and the KKK are equivalent. I have some trouble believing this. Their stated agendas are very different. The KKK seeks to control, terrorize, and harm people who are not white, whereas the Black Lives Matter movement seems to be interested in protesting what they see as inequalities in the system.
Well, the Black Lives Matter movement certainly is relaxed about terrorizing white people. I'm not suggesting I didn't actually call them equivalent. What I said was the world they want looks quite similar. In terms of the segregation they want, the sort of racial divisions they like to stoke, looks quite similar. Now, I think we can move on to the next question. I think we can move on to the next question, except to say one thing about Black Lives Matter, and that is that it is possible... I'll say one more thing about Black Lives Matter, and then we'll move on. All right, listen, you're taking time away from questioners, which is rude. I don't care what you believe in, but you're being rude, so stop it. It was that courtesy we were talking about earlier, remember? I think it's possible to believe that, as I do, that black people have some valid grievances in this country, that the legacy of slavery is still with us, that black people deserve some restitution. They still are owed something. It is possible to believe that, and yet at the same time believe that Black Lives Matter is not the answer. That's what I believe. And to equate, as Black Lives Matter so often does, anybody who disagrees with their particular methods... So what's the answer? For a start, black communities should stop voting Democrats into local government. I think by any objective measure, race relations compared to when Obama came into office are a disaster. Obama has done nothing for black people. Once again, you're being rude, and I'd like you to wait until you're called on for questions, please. Here's the thing about the American university system that the Black Lives Matter movement hasn't understood yet. And it is that if you go to somebody with an open mind, intellectual humility, and you ask them to have a discussion with you, you present your version of the argument, you present the facts, and you ask them for a calm, mature discussion, the chances are they'll listen. And the chances are that you'll be able to reach an accommodation. The chances are that at least you will have a good idea of what the other person believes. Black Lives Matter prefers to simply shout until the other person goes away. I think we can move on to the next question. Shall I just point from here? Yeah.
Milo, what are some of your favorite designers and brands?
Who am I in today? I'm in New and Lingwood today, which is a very fine British tailor on Jermyn Street. If you ever get the chance to go to London, it's just behind Fortnum & Mason, which is our fanciest department store, possibly after Harrods. Harrods is a bit tacky these days. Other than that, Ralph Lauren, one of yours. And, I don't know, probably, who's my favorite? Maybe, maybe Armani. All right. Okay, next question. Thank you. Okay, was that one over there? This one? Yep.
Milo, what do you think can be done about the refugee crisis? I don't hear much about that or anything.
Yeah, you're relatively well insulated from the consequences of mass Muslim immigration in America because you haven't really had any yet. In Europe we have, and we've seen some of the results. Now, the argument that is sometimes made about, for example, Britain is that it's a melting pot, that it has always been a nation formed by immigrants, and to an extent that's true, but there's been one unifying factor in England's history which no longer obtains. And the unifying factor was a set of values that Britain exported to the rest of the world, including America. And in fact, America has taken those values and taken them up to their fullest, highest, and most perfect expression. The values of freedom, of democracy, of property rights, of freedom of speech. You guys, by and large, apart from the Black Lives Matter guys, do a really good job of that. So it makes me sad to see America slide into European-style healthcare and European-style language policing under this president. Because what makes America great is that it took the values that Britain didn't invent, but it did export successfully to most of the world, and turned them into, you know, almost the perfect experiment in democracy and the perfect experiment in freedom of speech. Nowhere else in the world has the sort of free speech protections that America has. You should be very lucky. You should feel very lucky. There is a safe space in America. It's called the United States. It is. It's what enables you guys to be rude. It's what enables these guys to be awesome. It's what enables all of you to say what you feel, how you like. And that safe space, which we call America, is the best distillation of those values. Now, the problem is that those values are under threat in Europe, and the threat that they're coming under is from radical Islam. Politicians have lied for generations, and the media has lied for generations to voters about what exactly mass Muslim immigration would mean. I wrote a column saying, as a gay man, I'm relatively terrified of it because I've seen what happens in Germany, I've seen what happens in Sweden. In Sweden, government officials said that gay people were being unnecessarily provocative for having their gay pride march go through a predominantly Muslim area. Extraordinary. Well, actually, that's the point of gay pride. It's to stick two fingers up at reactionary, bigoted, backward cultures. So the answer to, the easy answer is stay in America. If you want to solve the crisis in Europe, these people need to be deported. Next question, please. I'll come this side next, I promise. This one. Mm-hmm.
So, like, radical feminists, feminists, before they got the narrative, they were actually had some things going wrong with them, and then when they actually did get the narrative and they got into government and did all the things, they won, and now they had to go quit their job and actually get a paying job or marry a rich person, right? So then,
what's the question, sir?
Anyway, so we're the men's rights movement is going to do the same thing. It's going to see do the feminist thing, going getting government, passing laws, getting the narrative. Are we going to see the same thing happening with men's rights, sort of like these radical masculinist kind of people coming around?
Yeah, I'll talk to you a little bit about men's rights movement. I'm not a men's rights activist. The reason that I occasionally write things they like is because, by and large, they're right. They are right in many cases about the way that society is being re-architected to be quite hostile toward men. They are right about a media culture that makes it perfectly socially acceptable to say, kill all white men. Makes it perfectly socially acceptable to say the most appalling, bigoted, nasty, spiteful, vicious things about men, and for the most part we're men, so we can take it, that if they were reversed the other way would be considered the most appalling sort of sexism. Now, the media has created an environment in which it is open season on men. And for the most part, men, being stoical creatures, have sort of just put up with it. It's reached fever pitch now, it's reached such extraordinary proportions that even women are giving up on feminism because they realize that it is a poisonous creed that pushes the genders apart. So you'll notice, for instance, in America, in just 2 years, and this was reported by Vox, who would not have shared these statistics unless they really had to, that in just 2 years, the number of American women identifying as feminists went from 28 to 18%. In the UK, it's even lower, because we are far more sensible than you on these issues. The number of women who identify as feminists in the UK is a beautiful 7%. So yes, go get a pat on the back. What women recognize, I think, rightly, is that although the feminist movement of the first and to some extent the second wave was one of the great achievements of Western civilization. One of the best things we ever did. One of the greatest things that we have done that we can be proud of is giving women the vote, giving women equal access to our institutions, and treating them equally in the workplace. That is not something that most of the world can claim. And we should be proud about having done it. But, yeah, we should be proud about having done it. Not because, I mean, it seems slightly silly to congratulate ourselves for giving the women the vote, and that's precisely my point. It seems obvious to us. It isn't in most of the world. And just like free speech isn't obvious in most of the world, just like many other things that we take for granted aren't obvious in most of the world. The problem with modern intersectional feminism is it's become, as Christina Hoff Sommers likes to say, a sort of female... Yes, she's wonderful. By the way... I don't know how many of you travel regularly, but Christina and I are going to do a joint lecture on feminism in Minnesota. It's called Calm Down. So it's on the 17th of February, so if you want to hear us more specifically on those issues. The problem with modern intersectional feminism is, as she says, it's become a sort of female chauvinism, where almost a kind of female supremacy, where men are routinely vilified and ridiculed. The men's rights movement has correctly identified this phenomenon. And they're the men who don't just stoically put up with it, because they're the men that recognize this generates some problems. It generates some problems if you have a child who you can't see. It generates some problems if you divorce somebody and, for no apparent reason, lose half your shit. Sometimes being gay is all right. It creates some unfairnesses. You know, women cannot at once shriek at men for holding doors open for them, and at the same time demand the sort of courtesy and consideration that we have, for example, enshrined in our tax code, where they get to pay much, much less in and take much, much more out for no apparent good reason. So the men's rights movement, from my perspective as a gay guy, mostly right about things. Now, I don't particularly like the tenor of a lot of the conversations they have, but consider this. Men have been told for 30 years by feminists that women want to be treated just like men, that they're just the same, they're exactly the same, there's no difference, any difference between the genders is socially constructed, women are just as tough and just as able as men. In many cases they are, but in many cases they're not as tough as men. And in many cases, women actually are sensitive creatures, and what feminists have done is sort of beat out chivalry from the public square, which I think is a shame. They've encouraged men to treat women not as precious objects to be worshipped, but rather as combatants in a culture war. I don't think that's healthy. And when feminists tell men, treat us just like you treat each other, well, that's what the men's rights movement does, because taunting is how men bond. If you've ever been to a locker room, which I have, I've been to a locker room here. If you've ever been to a locker room on a sports pitch, or taken part in any kind of competitive sport, you will know that taunting is one of the ways men bond. Well, men can cope with it. Women very often can't. I debated a professor on this on Sky News who admitted very readily that women do cry more often. All right. Let's move on to the next question. Yeah.
Your article is about David West essay, Bill Nye.
Yeah.
They've legitimized views that I've held for a long time. I know they're not your most popular work, but I'm going to continue with that, and who's next?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a series, scientists who are actually really stupid. And my series, I started with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is very stupid. Bill Nye, who is very stupid. I'm not sure where to go next with it. I'm thinking Michael Mann, who is the hockey stick curve guy, one of the most discredited memes in recent science, or possibly Stephen Hawking. I haven't decided yet. Next question. Let's get more from this side. Yeah, over there? You? Yeah.
Milo, my question to you is, do you think Black Lives Matter is what the proponents of it make it out to be, a systemic, deliberate killing of black men targeted by the police? If so, what would it take for the moment to blow over? Will time just alleviate the sort of tension we see as a result of this?
Mm-hmm. It's very obvious that the approaches so far haven't worked. I understand why black people in this country are angry. They deserve to be. They're right to be angry. But the sort of racially divisive, hateful, intolerant, yell, yell, yell until they shut up and go away, intimidatory tactics of Black Lives Matter are very clearly not the way to repair tensions between the races. You don't fix a society and enable people to work together and be happy together and live, love, and prosper together by driving division between the races, and that is the effect of Black Lives Matter. It's very straightforward. Now, what happens with this movement? Who knows? I think that much of the impetus of Black Lives Matter comes from a sort of white liberal guilt, and you see a lot of the journalists who support it most fervently in the media are all sort of bitter 35-year-old white liberals. And very often they buy into this sort of, we're responsible for all the awful things in the world. Well, let's just get real on this, okay? Well, yeah, but we also went to the moon and built the internet and the pyramids and... But you see that kind of one-upmanship is precisely what Black Lives Matter is designed to create, and I don't believe that's the way to have a dialogue. I don't believe that's the way for us to heal. I don't think that's the way for people to get on. I'll tell you an interesting. The reason we don't have this problem in England, we have a very different history when it comes to slavery in England. But I'll tell you why we don't have a Black Lives Matter in England, and it's because it's this big. It's because the majority of black people who came into England originally, Afro-Caribbeans, came with the same set of values that many of the white locals had. They believed, that many of them had gone to English schools, they believed in some of the same values British people had, and this is one of the reasons why, in Britain at least, Caribbeans have some of the highest rates of interracial marriages of any group in Britain. Because the black people that... Sorry?
How did they get to the Caribbean?
Slave ship.
You're a white knight, dude.
You're gonna be mad forever.
As I said earlier, we don't... As I said earlier, we don't have the same problem with this in the UK, partly because we don't have such a large community that is so obviously deserving of restitution. My suggestion is that black people should stop voting for Democrats. I said that earlier because that clearly hasn't worked. All of the racial tensions, all of the overflowings have happened in Democrat-run cities. And they've happened because black people vote badly. They vote for Democrats. What they should be doing is voting for people who are going to instill a sense of aspiration in local communities and not perpetuate victimhood and grievance culture. Because the perpetuation of victimhood and grievance culture, which is sort of what we're talking about in feminism and in campuses generally, is precisely what's holding American black communities down. And until people stop playing the victim and stop trying to rank races against one another, which is what Black Lives Matter tries to do, we're not going to get anywhere. Next question, please. The only time I want to be up against a black man is after 11 p.m. Next question. Yep. Yeah.
So how do you reconcile being a libertarian with what are universally considered to be fascist values of deporting entire ethnic groups or religious groups?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that we often suspend many of our highest principles in times of, for example, in times of war. I think that the threat posed by radical Islam to the foundation of our culture, to everything that Western nations are, represents a threat so significant that we need to very carefully consider whether these people are allowed to join our societies. Now, very often you'll hear from people about the immigration debate, well, the Constitution protects free speech and all the kind of stuff. Well, the Constitution doesn't apply to non-citizens, nor do any of the other freedoms and protections that we have in this country and in the UK and in any other European country. Those freedoms, those libertarian provisions, only apply to people who live here. We don't, and pay, well, yes, and pay taxes. Don't pay taxes, you shouldn't vote. We are not under any obligation to import barbaric, backward cultures which suppress women, which discriminate against homosexuals, which are the genuine patriarchy, if there is one anywhere in the world, because it's not on American college campuses, it's in Raqqa. We're under no obligation to import those people into our communities. I'm a libertarian insofar as I believe that when you live in this country or you live in the UK and you pay taxes and you subscribe to the values of that country, you should be free. You should be left alone and be free to do as you want. That doesn't mean that 5 million people should be allowed to come in who are dedicated to the destruction of our way of life. Next question. I think you. Yep.
So one thing that's been really interesting about this Republican primary has been kind of the fight for the soul of the party. So I want to know what you see as the future of the party as far as like building new coalition, like what demographics and interests.
Well, obviously, there's a sort of populist contingent that started the Tea Party, now represented by Trump, and I think many of the people like me fall into that bucket as well, which is rightly astonished by the extent to which the Republican establishment has completely given up on its own voters. The Republican establishment, in many respects, simply does not reflect America anymore, doesn't represent its values, doesn't represent its voters, doesn't speak to its voters, and in some cases even actively dislikes them. You get the sense very often from people like Rick Wilson, this Republican activist, and from much of the old press, that Republican voters, that when they seem to treat Republican voters like liberals used to treat Republican voters, like they were backward bigots, like they were, hillbillies in pickup trucks with guns and religion. I'm sorry?
And they porn.
Well, indeed, hentai, I think it was. They have tentacles. It distresses me to see that the left doesn't do this, and I don't know why we do, because the left has never done this. I don't understand what happened. The Republican establishment decided it was going to look up to liberals for approval and say, is this okay? Is this racist? Is this sexist? Am I all right? With the result that they no longer play offense, they only play defense. This is my perspective as an outsider anyway. The Republican establishment seems to me, the Republican Party in this country seems to me no longer fit for purpose. So I'm very happy to see somebody blowing it apart, and I think we should all be very grateful for Daddy. Next question. Let's do you. I'll come up the back in a minute, I promise. Where do you see that going? It seems like it has Yes, I was greatly humiliated recently by. I was greatly humiliated recently by having my verified badge on Twitter taken away. And it happened because I made one too many jokes about feminism, I think. And perhaps also because I pretended to be social justice editor of BuzzFeed. I told people I've been appointed social justice editor of BuzzFeed, and then I started the hashtag feminism is cancer. What they really didn't like was that I started a poll, and it said, would you rather your child had A, feminism, or B, cancer? And cancer won. 22,000 people voted in the poll, and cancer won 55-45. Twitter was using a mechanism which is designed to protect public figures from impersonation as an ideological slap on the wrist. It announced today, in advance of its earnings call, when it's expected to... well, who knows? I mean, anything could happen, but the company is in free fall. The stock price is in free fall. Investors are concerned about three things in Twitter. They want to know, they want transparency about the product roadmap, which means they want Twitter to tell the truth and stop making arbitrary policy decisions like, this kind of opinion is not okay anymore. They want user growth of the kind that I bring. And they want engagement from their power users. Well, all three of those things are sort of blown out of the water by taking my verification badge away, which was a very clear signal to conservative media that any of them could be next and that we're not really welcome on Twitter. And you can see very clearly from the people that they have appointed to their trust and safety policy committee today exactly what Twitter's priorities are. They include, far-left intersectional feminists, all manner of progressive organizations designed to shut down speech, not to open it up. Jack Dorsey has no idea what free speech means, and he doesn't know who the bad guys are. So Twitter is dying, and it's dying because progressive politics are bad business. It's dying because it doesn't reflect the way people actually have conversations. It punishes people for jokes, punishes people for wrong think, punishes people for being conservative. And as a result, the platform is dying. And the people who like it the most, the people who, the feminists and the activists who think Twitter is their playground are going to be very lonely in 2 years when the rest of us are gone. So I would start making your preparations now, because it's not going to have the same influence it does today in 2 years, if it's even around. But most likely, now the share prices dip, I'm getting a bit off base here, but now the share prices, if you really care about this, because I'm a technology editor, so I know a little bit about this, now the share prices dip below 15, it's likely that there'll be some kind of fire sale, so Microsoft might own it next year, in which case it's fucked. Next question. Up the back, yeah, you? Yeah. I'm just guessing, but just say yes. I can't see that.
So my question is about your characterization of the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay. Now, you characterize them as sort of divisive, antagonistic, loud, etc. Have you ever...
They've made that clear themselves this evening.
Just a quick question so we're on the same page. Have you ever heard of the Harvard Implicit Biases Test?
No.
Okay, so what they do essentially is you can go on their website and you can take a test which shows what you associate with people of different creeds, colors, genders, etc. And they've been doing this for years, scientifically controlled study, very reliable, and it turns out that nearly everyone thinks black people, just by virtue of being black, are loud, divisive, antagonistic, etc. So to me, what that tells me is that, they're probably not, and we just perceive them that way for whatever reason. So my question is, why are you so confident in your assessment of Black Lives Matter when almost all the scientific evidence shows us that we misinterpret black people?
Well, that's not what the study you just cited says. It says that people... That's not what the study you just cited says. What it says is people perceive certain characteristics in black people. Well, they might be right about that. Next question. No, I gave a response. What I said.
Let him talk.
I gave a response. What I said, unless you believe. Given the segregation in this country, it's not unreasonable to assume that different speech codes have evolved between different racial groups, and different cultural milieus give rise to different sorts of interpersonal behaviors. Certainly, we know that black people use Twitter differently, for instance. The way they use it, there are metrics on this. There's plenty of research to show how black Twitter operates differently, linguistically speaking. They use hashtags differently. There's no reason to suppose that the results that are shown by this study aren't in fact the case. People perceive black people as being louder because black people are louder. That's possible. It's not racist to say. It might just be a difference between us. I did say that, but if you want the fuller answer, which you're not going to like, that's it. Another question, please. Yeah, you?
So, earlier in the talk, this is a two-part question but they're related. Earlier in the talk, you mentioned something about statistics and rape are not different in colleges. And I'm interested in that because I've been made to believe that I am a rapist when I have never raped anybody. And it's a stigma that I would like to dispel with statistics. In addition to somebody who wishes to want to look at facts, like you've looked at facts, how do we start at colleges in a safe place to look at these types of ideas?
Well, distressingly, colleges are not a safe place to examine these ideas because you will get shouted down and you'll get called a bigot and a misogynist and a sexist for examining these numbers. Now, we're expected to believe by the left that American university campuses run by liberals are hotbeds of rape and racism. We're expected to believe that the levels of sexual assault on these campuses are, as I said earlier, comparable to the Congo, where rape is used as a weapon of war. This stuff doesn't stand up to basic scrutiny. It's the result of advocacy research and credulous journalism. I think the smartest thing you can do is rely on the gold standard of statistics, which for you is the Department of Justice, which say, by the way, it's not great reading, let's be honest with one another. What the Department of Justice says is that it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 women who are sexually assaulted on campus. It's probably more like 20 or 30. That's nothing to be proud about, by the way. But certainly we can't fix the problem unless we understand the scope of it. And we can't understand the scope of it if we keep lying about it. And progressive activists have been lying about it for decades. They've shown no interest in correcting the facts when it's clear that they're lying about it. My advice to you, I'm sorry to say, and I'll echo something that Ben Shapiro said at his Missouri speech. My advice to you, I'm sorry to say, at university is keep your head down and get your education. Because you're in a hostile environment that is not conducive to the open, free exchange of ideas. That is not what American universities look like anymore. I would encourage you to do the best you can to keep your head down, get a good qualification, get out into the world of work, and change the world another way.
Where can I get educated? Where can I educate myself?
Well, on this stuff, I think you should read Christina Hoff Sommers. She doesn't just do great YouTube videos, she also does great books. Come to our talk in Minnesota. There are other people as well. I forget her name, but she wrote Men on Strike. I think she's a doctor. Huh? Yeah, maybe. She's married to Insta pundit Glenn Reynolds in Texas. She wrote a great book, Men on Strike. The statistics are out there. It's just that progressives in the media don't want to run them. Well, Camille Paglia is a goddess, but she, she's right about everything. She doesn't have, she's less active these days, so she's not particularly, she will speak in general terms, in cultural terms, about some of the problems with modern feminism, the attitudinal difficulties that she finds that modern feminism has. She doesn't necessarily get into statistics as much these days. And I think her current research is to do with something to do with Aboriginal art or whatever, because she's a very prolific academic, so she's not really focused on feminism at the moment. Next question. I'm happy to carry on if you guys would like, so... we can carry on until we get thrown out or Matt gets tired of standing. You can sit in my seat. He's going to put him off stage. The next question. Let's do you over there. Yeah, this one.
Milo, you're awesome. Thank you. All of the narrative about you being a hate monger and full of hate, why is that the narrative that the people who dislike you and your ideas take?
Well, it's very straightforward, yeah. Thanks for the question. What the left typically does when you present inconvenient arguments is it seeks to delegitimize the speaker in a variety of ways. It will call them a bigot, a sexist, a homophobe, a misogynist, or whatever. Because what it's trying to do is sort of isolate that speaker and make them socially untouchable. So if you go to one of their talks, there's something wrong with you. If it gets discovered that you're a reader of certain people's columns, you may come in for social censure. This is how the left operates, because it doesn't like to interrogate arguments, it prefers to interrogate people. So feminism wants to interrogate gender, Black Lives Matter wants to interrogate skin color, neither of them are very good at debate, neither of them are very good on facts. So instead of...
Proving him right. You know what a debate is?
I was about to make a point about shouting down, but I don't really need to, do I? This is the problem with these movements. You start out trying to be nice, and by the end of the event, you kind of come to the same opinion everyone else has, which is just the rude, antagonistic people who don't really want to know anything. They just want to yell and make a fuss and get attention. As a professional attention seeker, let me give you some advice. Sometimes it helps to listen first, so you can respond more intelligently. Let's go to the next question. Yep.
I'm a senior in high school, and unfortunately, unlike my friends back here, I can't find my white privilege, and I don't have a lot of
You're not alone, sir. It seems to have gone AWOL for an entire generation.
You know, I've been looking for ways to aid me into getting into college and getting financial aid, and unfortunately, I don't have the privilege of affirmative action.
You see, it's strange you should object to that because you're getting... Don't you guys get free SAT points? Please carry on with your question, sir.
Or my other option is I can pull a Sean King and claim I'm transracial.
I too have always believed I ought to have been born black, but I'm afraid we may not be able to go the same way as. Carry on with the question, we'll get through it. Let me say one thing. Most speakers, I'll just say this, most speakers would have had you removed by now. I'm very happy for you to stay, but you've got to be more polite. If you don't want to be here and you don't want to listen, leave. If you want to be here, be polite. We're not going to put up with any more shouting. We're not going to put up with any more yelling. We're not going to put up with any more of this. Calm it down or go. Would you please continue your question, sir? I'm close to having these people removed, so let's try to avoid that. Just you carry on. I can hear you.
I would like to learn how I can qualify for the Milo Yiannopoulos white privilege.
I think you have. As you correctly identified, there are all sorts of benefits available if you don't conform to the straight white male of mythology stereotype. The government statistics in the UK demonstrate very clearly that the most educationally underprivileged group in Britain is poor white boys. In America, the situation is more complicated. There are problems with black education, deep-rooted problems. That's not something I felt that I was qualified to address. What I can do, however... How does it feel to be funded by an old white man? All right, what I felt I could help with was a group that here too is suffering. And I don't think we need to get into league tables of oppression like the left does, because it doesn't take us anywhere helpful. It's just all we end up doing is yelling at each other, and we don't get anywhere. So what I identified was a group of people that were suffering, that were hurting, that were educationally underprivileged, and that I felt like I had some affinity to. Other people are perfectly willing to open their own foundations if they wish to. The best thing you can do in this hall, if you don't agree with my privilege grant, is do well in life and open your own. Now. Certainly if you're a woman in the audience, you are a white, Western, middle-class woman, you're the most privileged group in the history of civilization. And you should have no problem, you should find no problem whatsoever in having a competitive advantage against men in the workplace. In fact, many of the statistics suggest that women under 40 earn more than men now for many jobs, and you have a competitive advantage going for those jobs. You should be able to do great in life and start your own foundation. So if you don't like it, you can do your own. The privilege grant is a small thing. Now, for poor families, very often the difference between going to college and not going to college isn't $50,000. There are some loans available. Most schools don't ask for that kind of money up front. Very often the difference can be $5,000 or $10,000, and people will try to assemble that from various scholarships, loans. Whether some are ability tested, some are means tested. I've established a scholarship fund that I think will help some people who need it. We have some wealthy donors who believe the same thing. We'll open applications later this year, and we will disburse scholarships for the next academic year, 16-17. It's $2,500. We're going to give 50 of the way in the first year, 100 in the second, and 200 in the third. So if you are looking to apply to college in the next 3 years, then you'll be eligible. So look out for details, and we'd be happy to give you our money. Next question, please. Let's go with you, the black. In the black outfit. Oh, unless I'm not seeing something properly. Am I being blind? Oh, no, sorry, black jacket, yeah.
Your hair looks fantastic tonight.
Thank you. I was worried. Do you know my scalp is like Vietnam up here? This is four bleaches. Like, I've got so much skin, like, just, oh, it's awful. This takes work. Don't do it. Sorry, carry on.
Second, something that's not talked about or as often from you is in the PC culture is the trans movement and gender pronouns and that whole thing. And included in that is like that is a need for safe spaces. The trans movement has no place to go. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that topic.
Well, I wrote a column saying that the T should be ejected from LGBT. And the reason I think that is that most of the objectives of the modern transgender lobby are entirely in conflict with what I think most gay and lesbian people want. Transgender lobby seems to be about policing language, about safe spaces and trigger warnings. It seems to be about heavily politicized posturing. It seems to be very anti-science, seems to not really want to look at the studies, look at the data, look at anything that might suggest different treatment pathways were better for sufferers of this psychiatric disorder. And it seems to me entirely antithetical to all of the good things about being gay, which are about liberation and experimentation and pushing the boundaries of what's allowed. So the transgender people I know aren't particularly happy with their own lobby. They don't feel like they're being well represented by the non-trans journalists who never stop banging on about this but don't actually know very much about it. The dirty secret about this is nobody cares about it. This is an invention of the left because it's run out of things to complain about. It's one on gay marriage, it's one on all of the equality stuff, it's one on everything else. So it's reduced, as all movements are when they run out of things to complain about, to being ever more shrill about ever more irrelevant things. Nobody cares about people who are a bit mental and want to cut their cocks off. Nobody cares about them. But we're forced by the left to take a political position on this. It is demanded of us that we have the right opinion about it so that we're not considered bigots or hateful people. Well, it's a perfectly reasonable point of view, supported by much of the science, that transition surgery isn't the right treatment pathway for people with this disease, with this psychiatric disorder. That's what it is. It's what it's classified as. It bears no relation to gays or lesbians. You know, one is a sexual orientation, and the other is a dysphoria identity disorder. It's a perfectly reasonable point of view, supported by the science, that transition surgery isn't the right treatment pathway for these people, and they should have therapy and drugs instead. My personal view is that we're going to look back in 30 years, much like we did at electroshock therapy in the Victorian era for schizophrenics, and wonder how we could ever have been so barbarically cruel as to subject these people to these treatments. Now, that point of view would get you fired from any major newspaper in this country. The reason you correctly suggest I don't talk about it very much is I don't think people care about it very much. It's just the left insists on us taking political positions on these things. It's really not that important. Yeah, in the black t-shirt.
So my question for you, as a UK citizen, what is your opinion on the upcoming referendum for the UK to leave the European Union?
I don't think it serves Britain's interest to be in Europe anymore. It's very clear now the European project isn't about a common market, it's about a superstate. Now, some people think that's the only way that Europe can survive as an economic power, but I don't see why we should decline together rather than all declining separately. And in fact, Britain, if it broke away, is not necessarily destined to decline like the rest of Europe is. I think British UK export markets are dramatically different as a result of the Commonwealth to the rest of Europe. Our values are different to the rest of Europe. Our currency, thank God, is still different from the rest of Europe. So it doesn't make much sense to me for us to be a part of it anymore. So I hope British people vote to leave, but I don't think they will. Next question. Yeah.
I was wondering your stance on what XKCD calls cytogenesis, where some author will post something defamatory about, let's say, you or the Gamergate scandal, which you've been involved in, and then Wikipedia will use those articles as sort of its base for constructing the article and only portray that one side. And then other articles will take over, read that Wikipedia article, and purport that one side without giving credence to the other side.
Right. Well, the media is deliberately and systematically dishonest, and it knows that Wikipedia is populated by a certain sort of person with a certain kind of politics. That's a very real phenomenon you're describing. Certainly the case in the Gamergate controversy, and the case about many public figures who don't have popular points of view. There's not very much that can be done about it except read better journalists. There are better journalists out there. There aren't as many of us, but I think if you're getting your information about people from Wikipedia in 2015-16, you need your head tested. And if you're a journalist doing it, you need to be fired. Next question. Yeah. I don't know. I thought I was, but they all seem so weird. Sorry, carry on.
What are your views on socialism?
It's worked out well.
This guy can answer me on socialism. Yeah, it's worked. Yeah, socialism's worked great, right? Everywhere it's been tried, it's resulted in glittering utopias of equality and happiness. No, I mean, I think if you, if you vote Sanders in, you should be ready to leave the country. Good news is, I'm very excited about like Sanders Trump, because you've basically got Daddy, who's awesome, versus this like crazy old man.
The Muppet.
Is that what you call him? The Muppet? Oh, because he's like those men in the box, right? Yeah, I never watched them all. We'll skip over the socialism thing. I think that's obvious. What was the first bit of the question? Oh, anarcho-capitalist. I like the idea, and I think everybody likes the idea, but then I think they hit 18. It's a bit like feminism in that regard. I think I like the idea because I'm sort of constitutionally fairly libertarian, but I don't like the way they talk about the military. They're incredibly disrespectful of service personnel, very rude about the armed forces. And why do they all wear pocket squares? Like, all of them. There isn't an anarcho-capitalist who doesn't show up with some awful pocket square, some nasty, cheap polyester bit of crap. I can't go along with hatred of the military, and I can't go along with fashion that bad. So whatever they believe, I think I'm out. But however, I'm going to be going to Mexico in a couple of weeks to talk to them about feminism as an attack vector of big state progressivism. On that, they are right. And many of these groups are right about a lot. It's just that they sort of get pushed into the loony bucket because their views are outside the Overton window, outside that sort of acceptable limits of speech and discourse bucket that the newspapers and broadcast news like to stick to. Some of those groups very unfairly get called lunatics. By and large, for the most part, the men's rights movement is right about almost everything and is unfairly characterized as a misogynistic sort of hate group. by and large, it seems like anarcho-capitalists are fun and interesting, but I'm glad they're not in government. Yeah, what's your name? Oh, I'm sorry. You'll graduate one day.
So it's not really a mystery that feminists love to live in this victim chamber. My question is, if feminists claim that they're trying to empower women, why do they try to get attention by feeling sorry for themselves?
Well, feminism is no longer about empowering women because women have been empowered. Indeed, it's always been weird to me that feminism wants to step down to equality. Women have always held the social and sexual power in most circumstances, in most situations. I mean, why do men do the things they do? Men go to the moon and develop the internet and do all these wonderful and interesting things to get laid. They do it. I mean, why do any of us do anything? Why do I have such ridiculous hair, you know? We do these things to attract the attention of whoever we want to be in or whoever we want to be in us. In some cases. You know, women have... Camille Paley is great on this. She talks about the fact that women have always held most of the social and sexual power in most situations. And feminism, you know, in claiming that it wants equality is weird because it sort of wants to step down to being like men, which is bizarre to me. What's clear, the modern feminist movement has become a sort of female chauvinism. It's become a sort of... It's a very thinly veiled misandry. And it's very unattractive. As I said earlier, women have identified this. That's why they're abandoning it. Feminism, actually, I think, is largely dead. And I think, although it still holds great power in among politicians and great power in academia and the entertainment industry, I think the tide of public opinion has already shifted away from it. All right, I've been told last question, so I'm going to pick the hottest person. No, I'm not really, because that would be mean. Okay, no, I'm not. I'm going to go for... I'm going to go with you. Yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that universities have no longer become a place to explore dangerous ideas, and it's just put your head down.
Can I interrupt you? Your accent is really adorable. Where is it from? Where are you from? Are you from here? You don't sound like other people here. Are you from like further south or something? Oh, no, it's lovely. It's just... Could you just read the phone book for me? I would love to. Come up after. Sorry, please carry on. I apologize.
Do we take what's attached itself to the left? How do we remove the left from that, take the regressive out of it, make it progressive again? Can we? Mm-hmm. Basically, how do we make the left great again? I mean...
It's the again that's the problem in that sentence. No, I mean, look, the left has been responsible for some things that we all now probably grudgingly admit were probably a good idea. Some, at least. Anyway. But, yeah, I mean... I think that the left needs to take control of the rogue elements. The right's been pretty good at that. So you look at the Republican establishment, they're quite good at sort of cutting out things they don't like. The Tea Party, they'd be quite snooty about. Trump voters, they're appalling about. And on the right, I think that's gone a little too far, and the Republican Party's in a bit of trouble. But the left has traditionally been a bit more monolithic and has tended not to criticize its most extreme members. I think what we need to do is to encourage the left to realize that feminism and this sort of resurgence of the Black Power movement and all of these various other sorts of weird intersectional identity politics-based innovations that have come about in the last 5-10 years are not going to win them elections because ordinary people don't like them. And I think the way to do that is to shine light on the weird excesses of the far left and using facts and humor. Nobody can resist the truth wrapped in a good joke. And that is always the best way to win an argument, is to tell the truth and to be funny. And the other thing I would say is after you leave university, increasingly we're coming into a period, I think, 2016 is going to be the year social justice effectively dies. I hope it is. I think 2015 with its man-spreading, its mansplaining, its man-slamming, you know, the absurd language policing, the ridiculous gender and race politics, the craziness with trannies. I think all of that stuff is now beginning to reach the public. I think it's beginning to reach voters, and I don't think they like the sound of much of it. So 2016 is the year of social justice. I think is going to get a good kick in the teeth everywhere that there are elections, and hopefully in the media too. When you graduate, after you've got your degree and kept your head down from your evil socialist professors, when you graduate, I think the smart thing to do is to start to gently and with good humor and intellectual humility to gently resist things when you hear them in life that are quite obviously not true and said to save somebody's feelings. Benjamin Shapiro likes to say that facts don't care about your feelings. Well, I find his approach sometimes abrasive, which is precisely why he does it, and he likes that. My approach is a little different to Ben's. I prefer to disarm people with self-deprecating humor. I prefer to laugh at myself before I laugh at others, and I prefer then to just drill down and stick to a basic set of facts that tell me a little bit more about the world around me. The way to combat progressivism and the way to make the left great again is to make the most extreme elements, is to force the most extreme elements on the left to retreat into the obscurity and ridicule they deserve. The way to do that is to gently, insistently, with politeness, and with firmness and with good humor, remind them that the world they describe doesn't exist. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. I'm very grateful to so many of you for coming out. I'll be here afterwards. Thank you to the guys who organized this. Matt.
Guys, I'm Matt Boyer. I'm the New Jersey State Chairman and Rutgers Chapter President for Young Americans for Liberty. Just before we get started, I want just be aware our exits are in front here in the back corners, and this is being filmed. So if you're uncomfortable with that, I'm sorry. There's that. But as you know, we're here talking about PC culture, talking about freedom of speech, talking about passionate bunch. I like it. But it's not about me tonight, obviously. We have Breitbart editor, technology editor, and media firebrand, Milo Yiannopoulos. So please give him a warm welcome, folks. He's here to talk to all of you.
Thank you for that lukewarm welcome. In case you haven't heard, Daddy smashed it in New Hampshire. Well, Daddy's done good work in New Hampshire, so your sassy gay uncle has come to spread the love here. I'm going to talk to you actually super briefly. I'm not going to take very long because I know that the exciting bit is the Q&A. And everybody wants to talk and have some questions, and we're going to have some fun there. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about why I think there are some problems on campuses at the moment, specifically with free speech and coming from one particular political direction, and why it matters, although you might think that most of the people who are asking for free speech to be shut down, demanding safe spaces and trigger warnings and all manner of other bollocks, why these people actually have a sort of outsized influence compared to their actual numbers. The protests are disappointing, by the way. Is there anybody in here who hates me? Anyone? Yes, there we go. Thank you. I'm afraid. This is an event for 7s and above, so anyone who just put their hand up, please leave. If you're from one of the feminist movements on campus, I've put an ice cream truck outside. It's going to be rowdy tonight, I can tell. I'm going to rattle through this fairly quickly. Anybody here believe in any of the... Let's talk briefly through the politically correct prescriptions of our age. Does anyone here believe that women are paid less than men for the same work? Put your hand up. Right. Everyone who puts their hands up, you're idiots. Does anyone here believe that there is a pervasive culture of rape that means that American university campuses have higher rates of sexual assault than the Congo? More than 1 in 5 women being sexually assaulted. Does anybody believe that about American campuses? Anybody? No? Fewer idiots on that one. Good. Well, that's something. These claims, based on advocacy research repeated by credulous journalists, are designed to do one thing. They're designed to push a particular political ideology on you that is divisive, hateful, bigoted, in many cases racist, in many cases sexist, and is simply not very much fun. And I like fun, so I want to talk to you a little bit about free speech and how free speech can be fun. Thank you. If you're in the audience and you are aggrieved about the gender pay gap, let me make your life happier and explain to you why you're wrong. If you take all of the money that women earn and all of the money that men earn, and you do a simple sort of division, you will arrive at a figure of, let's say, 79 cents on the dollar. The problem with this is that it is babyish economics of the childish kind that only the progressive left could possibly believe in. The problem with this stuff is it doesn't take into account the different choices that women make. It doesn't take into account the fact that women tend to work shorter hours, they have babies, they do all sorts of other things that mean that it's not an an oranges to oranges comparison. Now, the problem with the wage gap is it's used to suggest that if a woman goes into the workplace, she's going to be paid 79 cents for the same work as a man. Well, that confuses wages with earnings. So if you believe that there's a wage gap, I would encourage you to return to the dictionary and learn what wages mean. Because it is illegal to pay a man and a woman differently for the same work, and in fact it doesn't happen. Now, all sorts of these sort of politically correct prescriptions surround us. There are feminists on campus who are demanding to kill all white men as though that was some sort of move toward equality, when in fact it's simply a gesture of female chauvinism and hatred towards people that the modern intersectional far-left feminist lesbianic movement doesn't like very much. Well, I'm going to be, somebody's been watching me too much on YouTube. I agree with you. It's outside the scope of the present discussion, but since you brought it up, no, I'm not entirely sure there's sex without penises. I don't really think that works. I mean, the lesbians that we like aren't really lesbians. They're just women in porn, aren't they? And and if there are lesbians, it seems to me a sort of fashionable political movement we should stamp out, given the extraordinary rates of domestic violence, the obesity crisis, and by the way, this is an interesting thing. Did you know that there is one respect in which the campus rape crisis is real? Do you know what it is? Can anyone tell me? I've sort of given it away already. There is just one rape crisis on campus. It is the lesbian rape crisis. If you look at the statistics from the Department of Justice, you will see that vastly disproportionately, the women who report sexual assault on campus describe themselves as lesbians. If there is a rape epidemic on campus, it's not being committed by men. And if you look at the justice statistics, which are the gold standard, you'll discover all sorts of things that feminists won't tell you. I'm going to take you on a really super quick tour because I want to get on to the questions very, very quickly about some of the things that are going on at other universities. Now, Rutgers doesn't have a completely clean pair of hands. You have a reasonable claim here to being one of the universities that sort of invented trigger warnings. You also have, you did, and I'm mad with you about that. You also have among your graduates a woman called Jessica Valenti. Has anyone heard of Jessica Valenti? Now, I'm not saying that everything at Rutgers, you know, I'm not saying Rutgers is responsible for the creation of Jessica Valenti, but you're something like Hitler's Austrian Art College. You sort of, you're not entirely responsible for the Second World War, but she did go here. It's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you. But yeah, no, I mean, Rutgers has an interesting history with this stuff. You have been at the forefront of many of these innovations